The crystal flute in my hand made the tiniest ring against my wedding band as I paused outside the private lounge of the Aurelius Grand Hotel. I hadn't meant to stop. I hadn't meant to listen. But a sliver of door had remained ajar, and my husband's voice slid through it like a knife wrapped in velvet. "You should see how lost she looks when I'm not telling her what to do," Cassian said, amused, almost boyish in the worst way. "Nyla can't even order dinner without checking my opinion first." A woman laughed. Lila Serrano, his executive assistant. I had invited her to our charity gala, like a trusting fool. "Does she really not notice?" Lila asked, her voice honeyed and cruel. "Why would she?" Cassian's reply was easy, relaxed, confident, the voice he used in earnings calls and investor meetings. "She shelved her career to polish mine. No income of her own, no leverage. She's comfortable. Dependence masquerading as devotion." The sound of their lips meeting snapped something inside me so cleanly, it felt like a string breaking under tension. The trembling in my fingers stilled. The tears that had been prickling behind my eyes evaporated, as if the air had gone white hot. I stepped away from the door, found my reflection in a gilt mirror, and studied the woman staring back. Emerald silk, a custom gown stitched for my frame, brown skin luminous beneath chandelier light, natural hair in a crown of loops and pins, diamonds at my ears. Cassian's mother's gift, not his. I looked like wealth. I looked like success. I looked like everything was perfect. But none of it belonged to me. Not really. The ballroom behind me pulsed with the life I had spent months composing. White orchids on every table, a string quartet dipping into something modern. 500 guests, donors, city officials, CEOs, gathered in a room I'd booked, persuaded, and choreographed into generosity. We were raising $2 million for city schools by midnight. My event, my calls, my work. And yet somewhere between the orchids and the chandeliers, I had disappeared. "Found you," said Priya Desai, my best friend from business school, cutting across the current of bodies to reach me. "The mayor wants a photo. Also, your gown is committing a felony." "Priya," I said softly, "I need you." She took one long look at my face and moved us to a quiet alcove that smelled faintly of lemon oil and old wood. "Tell me." "Cassian," I whispered, and my voice didn't crack. "With Lila, in the private lounge. He said I'm nothing without him. He said I'm decoration." For a heartbeat, Priya simply breathed. Then her hand closed around mine, anchoring me. "He said that where you could hear him. He said it where anyone could. What do you want me to do?" "Help me survive the next 2 hours." I straightened my shoulders until the gown felt like armor. "Then help me end my marriage." Priya's jaw worked once, twice. She nodded. "Okay, smile now. Burn later." I walked back into the ballroom as the quartet slid into my cue. I delivered the speech I'd written at 3 in the morning, about classrooms and equity, about the kind of city where talent isn't wasted by zip code. I thanked donors by name. I thanked my husband by name. I even thanked his company. When Cassian arrived beside me for the cameras, I lifted my cheek to his scripted kiss and gave him the kind of smile that makes headlines. No one knew that the woman speaking into the microphone was already gone. At midnight, when the last guest left and staff folded linen like quiet origami, Cassian wandered into the business center, jacket slung over his shoulder, tie relaxed to signal that he was a man who had previously been formal. "Ready to go home?" "Almost," I said, eyes on my phone. "Thank you notes while details are fresh. I'll take a car." He blinked. I never stayed without him. "Don't be long. You get messy when you're tired." After he left, I opened my laptop and began to build the scaffolding of my escape. Apartment listings, divorce attorneys, a new number, a separate mailbox. I wrote until my vision blurred and the letters on the screen swam into resolve. At 3 a.m., I went home to the penthouse I no longer considered mine and stood in the doorway of the bedroom where my husband slept, beautifully false, in blue-gray sheets. He had convinced me that I needed him. He had convinced me that I was smaller than my own ambition, but he had never met the version of me that waited like a tide. What Cassian did not know, when my grandmother passed 3 years ago, she left me $200,000. He'd been in Zurich when the will was read. I never told him. I tucked it into an account under my maiden name and pretended to forget the password. It wasn't a fortune next to his billions. It was enough to begin. I slept in the guest room with the lights off and the future blazing in my chest like sunrise. By morning, I had packed a single suitcase, gathered the essentials, laptop, passport, my grandmother's jewelry, the degree I had earned at Columbia, and set the rest on fire in my mind. At 7, Cassian found me in the kitchen in jeans and a sweater he'd once called, "Too plain for you." "You're up early," he said, reaching for coffee I'd already brewed. I couldn't sleep. He scrolled through his phone, pleased. The gala exceeded the target. Strong press. Nice work. "We need to talk." Something in my voice made him look up. Not pleading, not performing. Final. "What about?" "I heard you last night." I didn't soften it. "You and Lila." For a heartbeat, color drained from his face. Then the mask settled. "Nyla, this is unnecessary. You know how powerful men—" "You're right," I said evenly. "It means nothing. Our marriage means nothing to you, which makes this easier." "I want a divorce," he laughed, a bark of incredulity wrapped in pity. "Be serious." "I am." "You won't get a cent. The prenup—" I read it again at 3 in the morning. "You'll walk with nothing. No apartment, no car, no card. What will you do, Neela? Where will you go?" "Anywhere that doesn't require your permission." He set the cup down with the slow precision he used when he was about to end a negotiation. "You think you can survive out there? You haven't worked in 5 years? You gave up your runway." "I gave up my runway for you. I'm taking it back." His smile sharpened. "You won't last a month." "Maybe not," I said, "but I'll last longer than this conversation." I placed a sealed envelope on the counter. "My exit plan in legalese. My lawyer will contact yours. I don't want your money, Cassian. I'm leaving with what I brought. Myself." "You're being dramatic." "I'm being done." He followed me to the foyer, his voice lowering into the tone that had closed acquisitions and crushed rivals. "Nyla, stop. We can make this go away." "It already has," I said, opening the door. "Priya's outside." "Priya?" His lip curled. "Of course. You don't intimidate me anymore," I said quietly. "That's new for both of us." The door closed between us with a click that sounded like a key turning inside my bones. Priya's hybrid idled at the curb. "You did it," she breathed as I slid in. "I did." "Where to?" "Your place. Just for a few days." "You can have forever if you want it." As we merged into the morning traffic, my phone erupted. Calls, texts, numbers I knew and numbers I didn't. I blocked Cassian. I blocked Lila. I muted anyone who used the words "be reasonable." The city unfurled around us, indifferent and holy. Priya's brownstone in Fort Greene smelled like turmeric and fresh coffee. Her husband, Avi, handed me an omelet and a hug. "You're safe here," he said, and I nearly cried because I hadn't realized how unsafe wealthy could feel. Over breakfast, I laid my plan bare. "I'm going back to consulting," I said. "Strategy for growth stage companies. I know the players. I know their pain points. I've been curating rooms for 5 years. Time to charge for what I do." "Clients?" Priya asked. "None yet. But I have a list of 20 names who owe me favors, and at least 5 who will remember I made their gala donations feel like coronations." "What about money?" I hesitated only a second. "I have a cushion," I said. "Enough to take swings." Avi drummed the table. "My friend runs a scrappy logistics startup getting pummeled by incumbents. He needs a brain. It won't pay like the old life, but it's a start." "Make the intro today," I said. The rest of the day I built a clean Gmail with my maiden name, a temporary site with a one-page promise, a spreadsheet of targets and dates and notes about what they bragged about at dinner parties and what kept them awake at 3 in the morning. I wrote a crisp 3-paragraph message template and customized it 20 times until each one read like I had only ever meant to write to that person. At 4, an unknown number lit my phone. I should have let it go to voicemail. "Nyla," said Patricia Morell, cool water poured into a glass of ice. Cassian's mother. "What on earth is happening?" "Good afternoon, Patricia. Cassian says you left over." "Nothing. Surely you two can sort this out." "There's nothing to sort." I kept my tone even. Because it's hard to hate someone who's never been unkind to you, even if she raised the man who just detonated your life. I'm not discussing details. I wish you well. Is there another man? Her voice sharpened. No, I said. There is only me. Silence. Then softly, as if I'd spoken obscenity in my own house. That's worse. I ended the call, my hands shaking, and Priya slid a mug of tea toward me. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone. I know, I said, but unraveling years of trained appeasement is an art that starts with ragged lines. At 6, Avi's friend called from a warehouse in Red Hook that sounded like forklifts and rain. We spoke for 40 minutes. He told me he couldn't compete on price or speed. I told him he didn't have to if he competed on predictability and radical transparency. At the end he said, "What would you charge for 90 days?" And I said a number that was both smaller than my pride and larger than my fear. He said yes. After dinner, I borrowed Priya's desk and combed apartment listings until my eyes burned. I saved 3 studios in neighborhoods where I could run to the subway without thinking about heels. I dropped pins on a map, clients, trains, places I could buy good coffee without feeling like I was trespassing. I made a list titled Non-Negotiables, my name on the lease, my money in my account, my hours my own. At midnight, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I let it go. It rang again. I answered, expecting another lecture wrapped in a signature scarf. Hello. Hi, Nyla, Lila said. Her voice was feathery, like she was trying to wrap herself in innocence. We should talk. No, I said. We shouldn't. Cassian loves you. He made a mistake. You too. I hung up. Then I blocked her. There are doors you have to slam, not because it hurts them, but because it saves you. Sleep was a skittish animal. I coaxed it with the blue glow of Priya's guest room and a notebook full of grids. When morning came, I felt hollowed and fierce. I toured apartments with a broker who looked at my lack of recent pay stubs like a contagious rash until I offered 6 months up front. Money makes hypocrites into poets. I signed a lease on a studio with a cracked skylight that made the afternoon light fall like stained glass. By day 3, I had business cards that simply read, Nyla Kingston, Strategy. By day 5, I had a first client, 1 apartment key, and a cheap desk I assembled myself with a butter knife and too much optimism. I sat on my new floor with a carton of takeout and my grandmother's ring balanced on a napkin and told the quiet room the truth out loud. You're mine. The work at the logistics startup was baptismal. Their systems were stitched together with hope and duct tape. Their unit economics hemorrhaged beneath every pickup. They'd priced themselves into a corner and turned the lights off. I spent the first week asking questions the founder didn't want to answer, and the second week installing answers he didn't want to pay for. By the third week, he was texting me photos of whiteboards like a proud parent. At the end of month 1, an email arrived with more gratitude than commas. At the end of month 2, a wire hit my account. Not a fortune, not alimony, revenue. I took Priya to dinner with my first check. She took a photo of me holding it, both of us laughing like we had gotten away with something. You look 10 pounds lighter, she said. I put down a mansion, I said. Turns out it was all made of expectation. The messages kept coming, some from real friends, many from the perimeter of Cassian's world. People who wanted to be neutral the way Switzerland wants to be scenic. I answered the kind ones and ignored the rest. I wasn't angry. I was uninterested. Rage had burned away, leaving clarity that cut far cleaner. 2 weeks later, my attorney, Sienna Park, slid a thick folder across her desk. He'll try to drag it out, she warned. Men like him confuse inconvenience with power. I'll be busy building a life, I said. He can be busy building delay. Are you sure about waiving alimony? She asked, pen poised. You're entitled to pursue it. I'm sure, I said, feeling the surety settle. I don't want any sentence that ends with, because of Cassian. That night, I walked the 3 blocks from my studio to a tiny bodega that sold flowers in chipped glass buckets. I picked out a bunch of sunflowers that looked like effort and brought them home. I arranged them. I tried. It looked like someone had poured sunshine into a jar anyway. On the 7th morning after I left the penthouse, I woke before my alarm. The city had that watery dawn light that makes everything look briefly baptized. I brewed coffee in a machine that hissed like it had been told off by someone's grandmother. I opened my laptop. I built a spreadsheet titled Empire because naming something makes it remember what it's supposed to become. The list had 3 columns: company, problem, offer. I filled 20 lines before my coffee cooled. Every time I hesitated, I wrote anyway. The only difference between an empire and a plan is follow-through and time. At 9, my phone buzzed. An unknown number again. I almost ignored it. Then I thought, if I am truly free, I can answer and not drown. Nyla Kingston, I said. I'm calling from Silverline Ventures, a woman said crisply. My name is Colette. We met at your gala last spring. I've been hearing your name from founders I trust. Would you be available to discuss a portfolio triage? It's sensitive. I looked at the sun sliding through the cracked skylight, scattering itself across my new desk, my 2 cheap chairs, my single vase of serious sunflowers. Yeah, I said. I'm available. I had left with a suitcase and a promise to myself. 1 week later, I had a lease, a client, an attorney, a spreadsheet with the word empire at the top, and a phone call that felt like a key. Cassian had said I couldn't live without him. I had started to breathe. Colette Rivera didn't waste time. 3 companies are circling the drain, she said over Zoom, her face framed by a minimalist home office, and the kind of plants that live because their owner remembers to live too. 2 might be saved. 1 needs a painless death. Can you separate which is which and explain it to founders who only hear their own echo? Yes, I said. I'll pay you for honesty, not flattery. Send a scope tonight. If it's clean, we start Monday. By sundown, I drafted a 2-page engagement. Discovery, diagnostics, decision pathways, and a promise I'd never again make to a man, but could make to a business problem. I will tell you what I see, not what you want. Colette signed within the hour. I stared at the PDF like it might sprout gilded wings and carry me across the skyline. Day 1, I walked into ArcLight Robotics and found a whiteboard mausoleum. Past pivots, scrawled in colors that had faded like the conviction behind them. Their burn rate was an apology written in gasoline. I mapped their unit economics in a grid, drew 2 red lines, and slid the page across the table. You're building a cathedral on sand, I said gently. We either shore up the foundation or stop pretending this is a church. They didn't like me. Then they liked the math. In 6 weeks, we refocused on a single SKU that actually sold, cut performative partnerships that produced press, but no customers, and repriced service contracts. The founder cried once. Then he slept for the first time in months. At Vesper Foods, a DTC brand that had confused aesthetic for strategy, I asked the creative director to list the top 5 SKUs by gross margin. She told me the top 5 by vibe. I smiled. I love your beauty, I said. Now let's save your business. We killed the pretty things that didn't pay rent, doubled down on the ugly hero, rebuilt the referral engine, and watched CAC drop like a terrible habit. The third company, Next Run Courier, needed mercy. I wrote the closure plan like a lullaby. Settle debts with dignity, place employees, preserve the cap table's best relationships for the founder's next act. When I delivered the recommendation, the CEO swore, then sighed, then thanked me for telling him the truth at the one moment it would still matter. I billed Colette on Friday at 6:03 p.m., feet up on my cheap chair, the cracked skylight catching a last hard bar of sun. She called 5 minutes later. You were right on all 3 and you did it in human language. I want to keep you on retainer. Happy to, I said, and it wasn't the money that made my voice steady. It was the feeling of being useful to the bone. Between site visits and spreadsheets, I made the studio mine. A thrifted rug, a narrow bookcase, sunflowers that looked like they'd made up their mind about the world. At night, I wrote a 1-page manifesto and taped it above my desk. Nothing performative, only effective. Build rooms anyone good can enter and everyone cruel cannot endure. Tell the truth like a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. No money attached to men who think they own you. Ever again. Sienna moved the divorce like a chess player who knows the endgame. Cassian's counsel tried tricks, continuances, document demands designed to exhaust me, invitations to talk like adults. I let the record show I had nothing to ask from him and nothing to hide. 4 months after the gala, A judge's stamp finalized what I had already felt in my bones. Congratulations, Sienna said, sliding me the decree. For what? For returning your last name to the person who earned it, she said. I walked out into a bright winter afternoon that made the city look lacquered. On a park bench, I texted Priya a photo of the papers. Done. She sent 37 champagne emojis and dinner tonight. You pick the place because you can. Work, bread, work. The warehouse founder in Red Hook sent a referral to a restaurateur who'd been trying to be all cuisines to all people and starving in the process. We cut the menu in half, raised prices to where integrity could breathe, and turned a dying Friday into a reservation that meant something. When she hugged me, flour dusted my jacket. I didn't brush it off. I hired one person. Olivia Tran, 24, newly minted MBA, more questions than credentials, eyes that took notes. Why me? She asked. Because you didn't tell me what you know, I said. You showed me what you can learn. We worked elbow to elbow at the wobbly desk until midnight on a Tuesday that felt like a door. I taught her diagnostic frameworks and how not to quote them. She taught me digital funnels, audience segmentation I had ignored while Cassian was teaching me how to be quiet. By month 8, we had a logo, Kingston strategy, and a waitlist. Colette looped me into rooms I hadn't known how to knock on before. Not because she wanted to be thanked, but because she understood that power compounds where women are not interrupted. She called once to ask a question and left me with a bigger gift. You keep saying consultant, she said. When do you start saying firm? When I deserve it, I said. You already do. The market is using your last name in sentences now. Build a container that can hold it. I signed a sublease on a small office in Midtown that had a view of a brick wall and a sliver of sky that felt like a signature. I bought 4 chairs that didn't wobble. I told Olivia to order business cards that named her associate because titles matter to people until they don't. We landed Sterling Field, a 50-employee property management company whose P&L read like a leak. In the boardroom, 10 executives sized me up like I was a nice skirt with questionable seams. I talked through a 40-page deck with 5 pages that mattered. You're misallocated, I said. Too many people pushing paper, not enough pulling profit. Vendor sprawl is eating your lunch. Your tenant screening welcomes evictions. You want us to cut? One asked. I want you to move weight to where it lifts, I said, and slid across a staffing model, vendor consolidation plan, and a tenant criteria rewrite that cut defaults by 70% on paper and more in practice. Who guarantees this? The CFO said. I do, I said. Hold back 20% of my fee. If the targets don't hit by day 60, keep it. That got their eyes. They signed. We implemented. On day 62, the CEO sent a note. Complaints down 38%, maintenance costs down 21%. 3 problem properties stabilized. Keep your fee. Add another scope. Olivia and I ate deli sandwiches at our not wobbly table and tried not to scream. Then we screamed anyway. At month 12, Kingston's strategy cleared just over $600K in revenue. Profit that smelled like sweat and printer ink. I took exactly what I needed from the business and left the rest inside the walls that bore my name. I bought a dress that fit like a lesson learned and wore it to no one's gaze but my own. That was when the knock came, at my actual door, not the office. Someone's here, Olivia texted from reception. No appointment. Says it's urgent. Who? She sent a photo of a business card. Cassian Morel, CEO, Morel Capital. I looked at the sliver of sky out the window and felt nothing rise in my body but air. Give me 5 minutes, I texted back, then show him in. He looked tired. Rich, but tired. The suit was still expensive. The man inside of it was not. Nyla, he said, like the past 5 years were a misdial. You've done well. You have 8 minutes, I said, because shrinking men think in round numbers, and I wanted this to feel sharp. He apologized. He suggested amnesia for both of us. Then the soft pitch unraveled into the hard truth. We're facing an audit, he admitted. It's complicated. I thought you might consult. Quietly. We could help each other. I laughed. It wasn't kind. It was correct. I wouldn't take your money if it came pre-laundered and gift-wrapped, I said. I won't staple my name to yours again. Not for 8 minutes. Not for 8 figures. You think you're better than me now? No, I said, standing. I know myself now. I called security. He left with the dignity of someone who still thinks the elevator will always wait. Olivia came in with tea she hadn't asked if I wanted. You okay? She asked. I'm perfect, I said, and discovered I meant it. 2 days later, Colette called. Smart to stay away, she said. Word is there's smoke. Where there's smoke in those towers, women often choke first. You didn't. I brought my own oxygen, I said. Good, she said, and shifted the topic like only people who truly wish you well can do. I want to introduce you to Richard Hale at Palladium Partners. He needs a blunt instrument wrapped in silk. That's you. Richard's office was on the 40th floor and had the kind of view that forgives 1,000 sins. He asked for my methodology. I answered like I was explaining a recipe. Ingredients, heat, the one step you can't skip without ruining the whole cake. I referenced a dry cleaning chain he owned and why 2 more hours on weeknights would lift revenue 30% in neighborhoods where people bring home their weekday after dark. He smiled like someone who found a missing key in his own pocket. You're hired, he said. 500,000, 6 months, diligence on target acquisitions. Start Monday. I rode the elevator down counting floors and blessings, both with the same quiet disbelief. By the end of year 2, we were a firm in every way the word requires. 12 full-time, a bench of specialists, processes that made quality reproducible without making us a factory. We took a larger office with windows that admitted actual sky. We put the word Kingston in matte steel on the wall and brought our mothers in to take pictures. The divorce receded to a line item in my personal ledger. Paid, settled, closed. The past hadn't vanished. It had been retired with honors and no further speaking role. I took my first real weekend off and didn't check my phone. I went to a gallery alone and cried in front of a triptych that reminded me of the way sunlight looked in my grandmother's kitchen. I said yes when a man at the coffee shop asked what book I was reading, and no when he asked if I'd like to discuss it at dinner, because I didn't owe my story to anyone who hadn't earned it. I slept. I dreamed. I woke, and the first thought wasn't him. It was work I loved and a life I had made with my hands. Cassian had said I couldn't order dinner without him. I had learned to order my days, and nothing on the menu belonged to him. The Palladium contract changed the slope of the line. Instead of rescuing one company at a time, we evaluated dozens like gemstones under a loupe. Clarity, carats, color, cut, the flaws that make a thing interesting and the cracks that make it dangerous. I flew twice a week, Chicago in sleet to walk a failing distribution center, Phoenix in oven heat to read a CFO's eyes while he explained a miracle margin. Your gift, Richard said, is that you talk to line managers like they are the point, because they are. We passed on vanity roll-ups. We greenlit 3 sleepy category leaders with discipline hidden under dusty brands. 2 years later, our memos looked prophetic. Luck favors people who ask the right questions out loud. Back home, Olivia grew into a force. She stopped asking me to read every email. She started telling clients exactly what would happen if they tried to bully her and did it in a tone that made them think they'd thought of it first. Proud of you, I told her one Friday when she moved a mountain without raising her voice. You taught me granite, she said. Colette invited me to a small dinner that wasn't small at all if you measured by net worth and consequence. That's where I met Daniel Mitchell. Calm eyes, careful questions, an investment fund focused on women-led companies, a laugh that sounded like someone who slept at night. You've built something with edges and empathy, he said after I told him what we did and why. Edges so it works. Empathy so it works where people live, I said. He didn't ask for my deck. He asked for my morning routine, which told me he valued outcomes more than theater. When he texted the next day, coffee? I waited an hour not to perform disinterest but to check whether I wanted to make space. I did. We met. We didn't talk about Cassian once. Then headlines bloomed like a rot. Morel Capital under audit. Sources said overstatement, whispers said fraud. Screenshots said the kind of spreadsheets that eventually become evidence. Patricia called, voice smaller. I'm sorry, she said, for not believing you. For everything. You aren't him, I said, and meant it. She had been kind in her way, constrained by rooms she didn't know how to leave. An assistant U.S. attorney asked to meet. Sienna sat beside me in a conference room that smelled faintly of copier and consequence. Did you ever review or sign company documents? Discuss investor communications? Have knowledge of any side entities? No, I said. He kept me ornamental on purpose. That tracks, she said dryly, and we all moved on. Work absorbed, we signed our first Fortune 500 mandate to repair a supply chain that had turned into an apology tour. It was a $3 million scope, the kind of number that once would have made me stand up in my chair and now made me move chairs around the war room and assign task owners with aggressive kindness. I hired 10 more. We added a COO. We put HR policies in writing that we had already been living because culture is what you do when it's inconvenient. On a Wednesday evening when the office looked like a battlefield we were proud of, Monica, my assistant, then our operations coordinator, now the person who kept the air breathable, poked her head in. "There's someone here to see you," she said, and handed me a card that might as well have been a ghost. Cassian Morel. I didn't tell her to send him away. I told her to give me 5 minutes. Then he walked in, prematurely gray at the temples, and no longer wearing invincibility like cologne. "I'm here to apologize," he said. "You're 2 years late," I said. He nodded as if that counted for mature. Then he asked for the thing he always wanted: benefit without intimacy, help navigating the audit. "We could help each other," he said, voice dipping into the register where he used to get what he wanted. "No," I said, and the word had no tremor in it. "You are not a pro bono case, and I am not your confessor." He flushed. "You think you're better than me now?" "It's not comparative, it's elective." I pressed the intercom. "Security, please." He left trailing the smell of a fire I hadn't started. Richard called the next morning. "Smart," he said. "Anyone who touches that mess is going to get ash on their cuffs." "I own 3 suits," I said. "All of them are staying clean." "Good," he said then. "Join our advisory board. Quarterly meetings. Big rooms. Bigger Rolodex." I said yes. In those rooms I learned a new altitude. Capital stacks, governance nuance, the kinds of inflection points that break companies or bend them into something finer. I spoke when I had something to add and stayed quiet when the air was full of chest clearing, masquerading as wisdom. The chair took me aside after the first session and said, "We need your plain English more than we need our Latin." We opened a second office in Chicago. Olivia ran point in New York while I was on planes. She got engaged to a man who treated her time as sacred. When I missed her wedding because I was in a windowless room in Dallas preventing 100 people from losing their jobs, I cried in the rental car and vowed to learn how to be present at more than earnings calls. Cassian pled to lesser counts. Then the bigger ones stuck. The headline looked inevitable in retrospect: Morel sentenced to federal prison. I read it once. I didn't gloat. Revenge had never been my business model. Building had. Daniel and I found a rhythm that respected scarcity. We traded airports and dinners like postcards. When he asked once whether I ever thought about going public, I said, "I think about control." He said, "Some structures let you keep it." He drew a diagram on the paper tablecloth. Dual-class shares, founder voting rights. "Only if you want scale," he said, "on your terms." "I'll think," I said, and meant it. By year 4, we were at $20 million in revenue with margins that made auditors nod appreciatively. I hired a CFO who'd left a big firm because she wanted to build instead of babysit. We built forecasting models that didn't lie and benefits that kept people from quitting to save their souls. Media found me. I said yes to 1 profile and no to 5. The published piece got the headline everyone uses to hook readers and flatten women. From billionaire's wife to self-made boss. I hated it. The article was fair. The comments were not. I did not read them. Colette did and called to tell me the worst ones, so I didn't have to wonder what sharks sound like. "People need to believe women are sponsored by a man or an accident," she said. "It's the only way their math balances." "I'll keep breaking their calculators," I said. We took our first international client. A manufacturer expanding stateside without understanding American logistics holidays or the way a Tuesday snowstorm in Ohio can turn a quarter. We built a cross-country implementation plan that was less strategy deck and more choreography. It worked because we listened to the forklift drivers first. By year 6, a funny thing happened. I grew bored of having to prove I was not ornamental. I stopped entering rooms ready to fight. I entered to work. People adjusted. Those who couldn't left the room. On a spring night, Daniel and I ate pasta at a place without a PR plan. "You ever going to let yourself be happy?" he asked, smiling to make it a soft landing. "I am happy," and I said. "You're successful," he said. "Happiness is a different animal. It likes open windows and unstructured Saturday mornings." "I could try one Saturday," I said, pretending to write it in a calendar I still filled with war. We walked home. On the stoop, he said, "I don't want anything from you you don't want to give." And that line loosened a knot I'd tied around my own throat. I slept late that Saturday and didn't apologize to anyone. When we crossed 50 million in value and recruiters started calling my people with numbers that made their eyes widen, we doubled down on why anyone stays: respect, growth, belonging, and money. Not just the last one. I told the team at all hands, "I don't want you to love this place because you're afraid to leave. I want you to love it because you're proud to stay." We made mistakes. We owned them in daylight. We fixed them without theatrics. The past kept sending postcards. Lila emailed a year after prison reports surfaced, subject line, "Coffee?" I archived it. 6 months later, she came to the office in a too-stiff blazer and eyes that had learned the price of being useful to the wrong man. "I'm here to apologize, Sharing," she said, and then she asked for a job. "I can do operations. I can—" "No," I said gently, "because I can't afford to teach you that loyalty isn't a costume." She nodded, small. For the first time, I felt the ghost of pity and fed it nothing. She left. The door swung shut on a chapter I hadn't been reading anyway. By year 7, Kingston's strategy was the firm people hired when they wanted the truth without theatrics. When a Fortune 100 copied our training frameworks, Olivia sent me a screenshot. "We're flattered," I wrote back. "We're also faster." I stopped counting how many days it had been since I left a man and started counting how many people I'd taken with me into a better room. Cassian had said I couldn't survive without him. I had built a company where no one's survival depended on a man's permission. And that was not a chapter. It was a doctrine. The conversation about going public started as a thought experiment and became a calendar. We met with banks that mistook us for a story and others that had the good sense to ask for numbers first. We modeled scenarios at 2 in the morning and at 10 in the afternoon to see if fatigue changed our math. It didn't. We could do it. The question was whether we should. "Control matters," Olivia said across a table strewn with binders and takeout containers. "Not because you want to be queen, but because dilution of mission is death." We designed a dual-class structure, Class A for the world, Class B for founders, because kings fall and queens fade. But voting rights are a kind of spine. We rewrote our letter to shareholders 7 times until it read like a promise I could hand to my grandmother across her kitchen table. We build value by telling the truth and doing the work. On listing day, the bell rang in a room so bright it felt like God had upgraded the bulbs. Our shares priced at 28, opened at 42, closed at 56. Headlines were kind and loud. The number that mattered? Not the market cap. The percent of our cap table owned by employees, because I don't believe in the kind of victory you can't eat with your team. That night in a rented restaurant, Olivia raised a glass. 8 years ago, Neela hired a kid with questions, she said. Tonight that kid signs SOX compliance memos and still has questions. We built this with our hands. May we never let those hands turn cruel. We cheered. We hugged. We went home early because the best part is not the party. It's the work that arrives on Monday in a room with your name on the wall. 2 days later, a reporter called to ask if my success was due to the vacuum left by a certain disgraced fund. No, I said. Our first clients preceded his headlines. Our growth is our own. She asked what I'd say if I met him. Nothing, I said. Silence is sometimes the only accurate sentence. Silence didn't last. The receptionist pinged me one Thursday. He's here, says he'll wait. I gave myself 5 minutes, and then I let him in. He'd been out 6 months. He asked for money. I will never fund the man who taught me how to starve, I said. Leave. You're heartless, he snapped. No, I said. I am finally uninterested in bleeding. Security walked him out. Monica closed the door gently, as if the past might bruise if it hit the jam too hard. Daniel and I celebrated the quiet wins. A Saturday at a flea market. A Tuesday, we both ended by 8. The Wednesday, I didn't bring my laptop to bed like a second spouse. When he asked me to move in, I said yes and kept my Connecticut house because independence isn't a location. It's a clause. We didn't marry. We didn't explain that to anyone. We introduced each other as partner and meant it like geometry instead of ownership. 5 years from my first invoice, we crossed $100 million in value. People kept asking if I was finally happy. Happiness is weather. Meaning is climate. I'd built a climate I could live in. I started a foundation, the Window Fund, for women leaving controlling marriages with everything but their own names. We paid first month's rent. We funded legal retainers. We offered skills workshops taught by people who said things like margin, custody, credit score, and didn't flinch when someone started to cry in the third row. The rule was simple. We don't save you. We stand with you while you save yourself. Camille Johnson sat across from me in my office because she had read a profile and recognized a map. I gave her checklists: open a separate account, photograph documents, change passwords, memorize one friend's number on paper. A year later, she sent a photo of keys in her palm. I named the plant on my windowsill after you, she wrote. It's a snake plant because it survives neglect and then thrives anyway. I cried at my desk, not because I had built a public company, because a stranger had built a private life. When acquisition offers came, and they came with numbers that might have made a younger version of me dizzy, I said no until one came with the promise that mattered. Keep our people, keep our mission, keep employee ownership meaningful. We negotiated like it was surgery. We closed at $4 billion. I stayed as an advisor. Olivia took the CEO seat like she was born with it. She announced she was pregnant at the first board meeting, and no one blinked because we had already normalized women having lives in public. My personal net worth put me on lists I never asked to join. Daniel laughed the first time a magazine called me a billionaire. You always were, he said. They just finally wrote a number you recognize. Shrine. With the liquidity, I did 3 things. Endowed the window fund so it would outlive my name, bought my mother a small house with a yard she could stubbornly refuse to landscape, and said yes to mentoring hours on Wednesday afternoons for any woman who could get to our office with a story and a plan. Why do you do it? A journalist asked. Pen lifted like a weapon disguised as a wand. Because a closed door saved my life, I said. Now my job is to hold doors open. On a Tuesday 12 years after a gala where a string quartet played me into clarity, I stood on my Connecticut balcony watching the light lift itself off the water like a curtain. Olivia texted, Co-CEO transition board, vote unanimous, don't be late. I drove into the city humming a song my grandmother used to sing when she washed rice. Something about what stays and what passes. The glass tower had our name on it still. In the boardroom, I looked around at the faces of people who had given me their best hours and promised them mine in return. After the meeting, a young analyst I didn't know stood in my doorway. Ms. Kingston, she said, flustered, I don't want to be disrespectful, but how did you know you were enough on your own? I didn't, I said. I acted like I was until the evidence caught up. That night, the past made one last attempt at being present. An email from Lila. Subject line. Thank you for not hiring me. I opened it. I had to learn the hard way that stealing proximity to power isn't the same as having it. I'm working at a shelter now. We use your foundation. I tell the women about a person I wronged who built something anyway. I don't expect forgiveness. I wanted you to know I finally understand. I closed my laptop gently. People can change. That didn't make my boundary a mistake. It made it a blueprint. A year later, at Columbia's centennial, I stood before an auditorium and told a room of future somebodies the one true thing I have learned. You will be told you are smaller so other people can feel appropriately sized next to you. Some will use money. Some will use love. Some will use shame. Build something they can't resize. Principles you keep when you're tired. Friends who hold you when you break. A body of work that respects the people who do the work. After, a woman with trembling hands asked if she could leave a man who would make leaving expensive. Yes, I said. The price is high. Pay it now or pay it for the rest of your life. When I got home, Daniel had made dinner that tasted like time. We ate on the balcony, the moon generous. Do you ever think about him? he asked, not jealous, just mapping my weather. Less and less, I said. He's a mile marker. I don't need to drive back to check if it's still there. Later in bed, my phone buzzed with a message from the window fund director. 1,000th grant issued today. I lay awake, not with adrenaline, but with a quiet so full it felt like abundance in its original language. Cassian had said I could not live without him. The empire I built does not mention his name. It mentions my grandmother's song, and Priya's borrowed couch, and Olivia's granite, and Colette's door opening, and Richard's rooms, and Monica's tea, and Daniel's open windows, and 1,000 Tuesday afternoons where we told the truth and took the next right step. It mentions every woman who wrote me with a shaking hand and a spine that remembered itself. It mentions a studio apartment with a cracked skylight and sunflowers that did not arrange themselves well, but insisted on blooming anyway. If you're waiting for revenge, this is it. Not his downfall, not your speech. Your life, built to your own measurements, worn every day, passed on like an heirloom. The bell rang years ago. I didn't hear it from a trading floor or a chandeliered ballroom. I heard it in the quiet when I closed a door on a man who thought I was furniture. I was never decoration. I was always the architect.